Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Best Picture Must Be Doing Something Right podcast. In today's episode, we've got our first Best Picture winner going onto the spotlight. But first, I'm here with
Hello.
Jamie. How are you
No,
doing,
not
mate?
too bad. Not too. Looking forward to this one.
Yeah, it's a really interesting case study, I think, this film. But before we start, I just wanted to say, if you don't know the premise of this show, you missed the first episode, go back and listen to the first episode. It was a good one. We reviewed one of my favorite films, Social Network. But also, if basically what this podcast is about, we review a film that's been nominated for Best Picture, or in this case, won Best Picture, and discuss how it's aged, what we like about the film, what we don't like about the film, and also how it performed during award season. What you'll find if you listen to this on Spotify, you'll find two versions of this. This is something that I discovered last week. I can't do much about it. I can't make it one show because there's like an audio version, which is just purely what you're hearing now, just our discussion of the film. And then there's a second version, which is a music version, which is exclusive only to Spotify because of the rights issues. So what you'll find on the full version, which is the music version, just intro and outro songs. So that's probably the intended version. I know most people who listen to the audio only version. So that might be just something bear in mind for future episodes. But if you're on Pocket Cast or Google Podcasts, you'll just find this audio version, which is fine. You still get to listen to the good bits, but for the full version, which I think adding the music stuff makes it more like entertaining, and I think it just gives me more creativity in the way that I make the show. So that's just the explanation why you're wondering why there's two versions there on Spotify. Anyway, shall we just get on with
Yeah,
this now?
we're jumping back a few years
Yeah,
to
2007.
and the 2008 Oscars, which, as you've said before, you think of as the 2007 Oscars because
Yeah,
it's about that year.
it's celebrating the films of that year. It's just really confusing as well because it was released in 2008 in the
Oh,
UK,
brilliant!
which is often the case for these kind of films. But I always see it as like 2007. That's how Wikipedia do it. So it's just really confusing when you're doing like quizzes. It really annoys me, but it's one of those things. It comes with the territory. And today's film is No Country for Old Men, written and directed by Joel Coen and Ethan Coen. Interesting fact: they're the only the second instance of two directors winning Best Director
At the same time,
because the Academy only allow Best Director to go to established pairs of directors.
Isn't it something to do with like
So
the guild rules or something? Around
yeah, so you have to be a member of the DGA, and but like when like an actor, so for example, like George Clooney is a famous director, isn't he, as well as an actor? So if he was to say, "Oh, I co-directed like The Descendants with Alexander Payne," just to get himself a nomination and stuff, that wouldn't make any sense, thing, because he's not the director. But they can do that. It's to stop stuff like that happening. Anyway, we're going off topic.
I think it's an interesting enough topic, the whole guild rules. But yeah, we should probably talk about the film.
The actual film. It stars Josh Brolin, Javier Bardem, and Tommy Lee Jones, and currently ranked 156th on the IMDb charts, winning 4 Academy Awards in the process. I think it had 8 nominations, I want to say. Haven't got the right
It did, yeah.
Yeah, 8, yes. I just want to start off by saying what were your general thoughts on the film?
Yeah, I think it's great. It took a long time for me to get around to watch it. I think the first time was
same with me.
2015 or 16 or something. As I was working my way through some Coen Brothers films. It's much darker than what I associate with Coen Brothers. Like I really like Fargo, for example, which I think is, well, the easy choice. But yeah, I mean, we won't go into spoilers yet, but it takes some it makes some bold choices, some interesting turns. On a side note, I think Oh Brother Where Art Thou is very underrated, and The Big Lebowski is probably my favorite of that era. But That's
Yeah,
what I
that's fair.
mean, though. You go from Fargo to Lebowski to Brother, and then 7 years later, after a break, you come back with a really dark and grounded film. It's
Yeah. If you
sorry, I think it's
go ahead.
brilliant, and obviously Javier Bardem's great. I think was this his breakthrough into English speaking cinema.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. Yeah. I just wanted to say, if you don't know about the film, the plot is pretty simple. Violence and mayhem ensue after a hunter stumbles upon a drug deal gone wrong and more than $2 million in cash near the Rio Grande. So it's sort of like it opens as like this sort of like, oh, we're inside some kind of
Yeah,
western film, really,
it
doesn't
has
it? With
that
the
modern
whole like the
western vibe. Yeah,
shootouts and you know the who's the good guys and who's the bad guys straight away when you get that opening scene, because it's weird, like with having the villain of the film caught in the opening scene. It seems to break the
the
purpose.
film feels like it's
And
trying to change some conventions of screenwriting, or trying to defy deliberately.
yeah, and then you have that scene with the police officer
Yeah,
on the phone, Javier Bardem in the background, coming towards the camera, especially if you go in blind with
no
this
music,
film
right?
and you have no idea.
Yeah,
Yeah, no music like at all. Like, I think I saw something saying that it's 16 minutes worth of soundtrack in a 2 hour, 2 minute film. And even then, it's
it,
minimal. Like the soundtrack, I was looking for a soundtrack to put at the start of the show, for
yeah.
the music version, and there's literally nothing. I'm gonna have to put the trailer
Oh
music
no,
on there because there's literally no soundtrack. It's so intense, but in a completely different kind of intense. So like, if you consider like a Nolan film, so like take Dunkirk for example, where the intense scenes in that are really really
yeah,
heavy music. Hans Zimmer
really
just
big,
going
really
all
bold and
out,
brash.
and then you build to a specific moment. While with this, it's sort of like you're just following the character's movements, a little subtle. I think the subtleties is what it makes
It
it great.
allows for it
Um,
allows for a much more natural atmosphere to do the music like that.
and you get right into the intensity right away. So like, especially looking back on it, if you know nothing about No Country for Old Men, you'll still know about that scene, the scene in the at the petrol
Yeah,
station. You'll know about that. I think that's the problem with coming to it late, is that I already knew what was
we're
going to
going to run
happen.
into that problem
The
quite a lot
friendo scene.
through cultural
Yeah,
osmosis. You just learn about these
yeah,
famous scenes and characters.
yeah, exactly. That's an issue with that, but you get the impression straight away. I think helped massively through Bardem's performance of uh of the intensity of the scenes. So, like the brilliance of Javier Bardem's performance, which was, I think, is one of the greatest supporting
Yeah,
performances in film history. I'll go that far. Definitely the best portrayal of a villain
won
I've
Best
seen,
Supporting Actor, no
and
surprise.
yeah, it was the first actor to win Best Supporting Actor at the Academy Awards, BAFTAs, SAG, Golden Globes, and Critics' Choice. I mean, actors have done it since, but he was the first Spanish actor to win an Academy Award for acting, and he was also, there was a study in 2018 about the accurate portrayals of psychopaths on screen, and apparently he did the best job of anyone as in terms of a realistic portrayal, because every single scene shows absolutely no humanity towards him, because it's all about everything in his mind is thinking, am I going to kill this person?
But it's also not like he's laughing maniacally like the Joker all the time, or he never smiles or shows any kind of emotion.
No.
It's just that the emotion he does show is
Ah,
cold
yeah.
and almost fake
It's
and sinister.
it's the
Yeah,
subtleties, isn't it? It's the scene where I think one of the scenes that stood out to me, and it's one of the few scenes where he doesn't actually kill the person that he's talking to, but it's the scene where he's looking for Josh Brolin's character at where he lives. It's sort of like, what is it? It's like a
yeah, yeah,
caravan park, isn't it? It's weird. But he's asking where does he work, because he's told us where does he work, and then he said, "Oh, I'm not allowed to tell you that." And it's just these. You can just see him getting angrier and angrier, just slightly, just repeating the same thing.
yeah.
Where does he work? where does he work? And sort of like you just get that straight away, so you know exactly what he's thinking that entire time, and you know, having previously seen what he's capable of, any second he's going to go, oh, hold up, I'm not having this. But then he needs to work out in his mind what's going to get me caught again. You can't play too many liberties with things. What am I realistically going to get away with here?
It's sort of like that.
That's the
It's
tactical
that
mind of
force
it.
of nature sort of villain, but also at the same time, he feels
Yeah.
very grounded. Like he could actually exist.
Mm.
Like he keeps getting away with stuff, but it's done in a way that the movie sells it, which makes it even more of an intense performance.
It's because he plays the role of the cat, doesn't he?
Yeah,
This is a cat
definitely.
and mouse film, but it's different, and I think what makes it stand out from your average cat and mouse film. If you think like cat and mouse films in cinema, you're thinking Thelma and Louise, you think Hella High Water, you're thinking Catch Me If You Can. That's all police chasing after the criminal. Where you have the mouse here is someone that, yes, he is a criminal in Josh Brolin's character. He is a criminal, but he doesn't belong in this world. He's just stumbled across it. And um, instead of having the police as that cat character, it's Bardem's character here, which makes everything way more intense because you know
There's no boundaries. Yeah.
the extent, you know the damage that happens if the cat catches the mouse,
It's almost as if like
which makes it way more intense.
Tommy Lee Jones just exists to like
Yeah,
show us he doesn't. He's also chasing Bardem, like he's his own cat, if you to put it in that metaphor. But at the same time, he feels utterly powerless to stop any of the main events of the film unfolding.
This is what I wanted to ask you about. Do you think the film can exist or could be a better film if Tommy Lee Jones' character just isn't there? Because I think it can exist, and I think it could be better.
It could, but I understand how this version of the script came about. Like, I completely understand why they felt the need to show us, because we can't follow Bardem around all the time, but he's the one who causes most of the incidents in the film to happen. And they've deliberately done it so Brolin feels like a typical protagonist character.
Yeah, I think he's the lead of the film. Like I was going to ask you about like cast.
We can't all follow him around all the time, if that makes sense, because there's certain scenes that require us to not know what's going on. So Tommy Lee Jones is just sort of hand-holding the cameraman around the events of the film. So I understand, actually, when you say it could be better, I think there is a good version of this film that exists where the audience is just left to experience this without that sort of hand-holding going on. We are just left to see the mystery unfold by itself. And maybe that could, actually, I've swung myself around to what you were saying, that it could be better.
I'll tell you why, because I saw in the trivia section on IMDb saying that which I didn't notice at the time actually, none of the characters share, the three main characters, so Bardem, Brolin, and Tommy Lee Jones, never share the screen together. There's not a single scene where they're both on screen at the same time, which I think is massively important in terms of feeling that kind of portrayal. It's something that I'll get onto in spoilers because there's a specific scene that I'm talking about here. But I do think the reason why Tommy Lee Jones' character exists in this, and obviously it is adapted from a book beforehand, so it's sort of like, it's not like much that the Coen Brothers could do about it, but it fits in with that central theme of why it's called No Country for Old Men. It's a realistic portrayal of the after effects of death, rather than in a mega violent film like this, it just being killing people for the sake of killing people. There has to be a consequence to death.
Well, it's like what was I gonna say? Hold on. It's like, so the idea that none of them share any scenes together, I think that really helps with the idea that Josh Brolin doesn't fit into this world, like you were saying. So it's also kind of a genre blend to it. We have more of a traditional cat and mouse film going on, but at the same time it feels like a modern Western. And then there's also this ultra-violent crime film going on, boiling underneath the surface. So the fact that I can't think of another cat and mouse sort of story that does that never has them share. I know that
Exactly.
in Fifth Element,
That's what makes it unique.
Bruce Willis doesn't share the screen with Gary. Only has one scene where they could have met each other, could have met Gary Oldman.
Yeah.
But that's obviously more of a comedy, more of a sci-fi comedy. So the fact it doesn't happen in this, that's a very deliberate choice. And I don't know if that's accurate to the book. But honestly, I've only just realised that myself now, and
Yeah. Well, there's obviously the scene with
yeah.
oh, sorry, spoiler. We'll talk about it spoilers anyway. I'm sorry, but like genuinely, that scene, right, that I was going to talk about is less than an hour into the film, but it's still spoilers.
I know.
Like that's how difficult this film is to talk about. I just want to talk about how it's aged. Do you think this film has aged well? Do you think it still appeals to a modern audience? Because I don't feel like this is a film that would be as successful now as it was back then, but would still be appreciated as an
I'm just
incredible film.
recovering from that trivia, but what I will say is I actually disagree. I think we've become a lot more.
Okay.
Actually, we have, because we've come a lot more desensitized to this kind of like violence in film. Maybe that would take away the impact from it. Let's say if it was released in 2017 instead of 2007, yeah.
2007.
If it was released a decade later, maybe the impact wouldn't have been as hard. But I don't know. I think it's still, at its core, it's still a really strong film. That, yeah,
because of how it's written, I think
it
the
would
writing makes it
objectively
timeless.
hold up to criticism if it was released today. But it wouldn't have.
Yeah.
The time it came out does feel very perfect.
I think it's arguable, like, if you look at its competition that year, I think it's the one that's aged the best. Like, I remember we were reviewing last year, There Will Be Blood, and I think that was the main contender for this, against this for Best Picture, and I wasn't a fan. Like, I don't think that film has aged well at all because of it's a different style, like, of like a slow burner sort of thing.
Hold on. Let me just
And
read out the competition: Atonement, Juno, Michael Clayton. It's a George Clooney vehicle, and then There Will Be Blood. That's not a strong category.
It's arguable. They're just different films. They're very different films. I've seen 4 of them. I haven't seen Michael Clayton, but I've seen Atonement, which I like very much.
Let us know.
I don't think so, really.
If you've seen Michael Clayton.
Yeah. Apparently it's really good, but I haven't got around to watching it. That's a film that hasn't been talked about
no, that hasn't aged well.
since it's come out, really. Atonement is, again, another film that was very big at the time, but I don't think has aged that brilliantly. But because it's a period film, it's sort of okay. So sort of like the thing is with Atonement, some of the more creative scenes, like the scene in Dunkirk with the tracking shot, looks like it's like a 5-minute tracking shot, but compared to like 1917 and Birdman that does the full film in one tracking shot, it looks a lot less impressive now. So it hasn't aged that well. And Juno is one of those films which I'm still surprised it got into a lineup of 5.
That's definitely dead. That was dead like a year after it came out.
Because of the portrayal of like the burger phone and stuff like that. And the communication of those characters, and it's like a very good film. I think it's very good. I do like Juno a lot, but I don't think it's like would ever win Best Picture in any year. So it's sort of like it became down to it was a heavyweight clash of No Country versus There Will Be Blood. The strength of There Will Be Blood is all about Daniel Day-Lewis and his performance, which I understand now why that was where it was awarded in Best Actor. While for No Country, it was awarded in the places where I think it deserved: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Adapted Screenplay. So a couple of above the line ones. While it lost 4 of its behind the what do you call it? Can't remember the term for it, but cinematography below the line. Best cinematography, best film editing, sound editing.
What would have swapped out for Juno? Maybe, or I'm having a look.
I don't really know. No, to be fair, Juno won the original.
Oh no, I'm not saying it's a bad film. I'm just looking at what all the options are for, because they were only doing 5 back then, so that makes me wonder if they were deliberately trying to do a genre blend, because they have to try and represent the year. It's not. I appreciate it. That's not an easy thing
I
to
think
do.
that was less. It was less of a case in back in the year 5. There was so sort of like Diving Bell and Bus Fight is a rare example of a lone director. It's become more apparent now. Film like American Gangster has been a film that's aged quite well in general. Into the Wild was a film that was successful at the time.
Yeah, Into the Wild.
Even something like Ratatouille is probably been the film that's aged the best out of any of the
animated
films in
feature
contention that
film
year.
between 3: Ratatouille,
Yeah,
Persepolis and Surf's Up. Strong
what a
year
classic.
for animated film.
Yeah. Do you think what I want to ask? I think before we move on to the spoilers section, because I don't
Yeah,
think we can really
I know.
talk much more about the film without moving on to spoilers. Do you think it still wins Best Picture? First of all, do you think it's a deserving Best Picture winner and deserves to be in that category of the best films of the year, which all the winners are? And second of all, do you still think it wins Best Picture if it
Oh
was
yeah,
voted on
definitely. I
now?
feel like it ticks all the boxes. I mean, we can discuss what makes up a best picture, but I mean it's faithful to its genre, but it also try and reinvents the wheel. I mean it tries new stuff. It's creative, so it's not one note or formulaic. The performances are great. The direction is spot on. The cinematography. Hold on, I just had this up. That's it, Roger Deakins. Cinematography is great. Can't complain
One
with
of the
that.
goats.
The editing, I have nothing to say about it, which is probably a good thing. I think you can. Well, that's the thing with editing. If you've done it right, then there's nothing to talk about. Yeah.
You don't know.
So I think it ticks all the boxes. I mean, what would you say makes up a solid Best Picture winner?
I think it's an atypical Best Picture winner because of the certain categories that I always try and fit them into. It's usually stories of battling against the odds. They're usually historical tragedies, and they're often about the industry. And this has none of those, so I feel like it's atypical in that sense. But if you look at back after the previous winners during that era, you have films like Million Dollar Baby, Crash, The Departed. So much darker films and much deeper films, much more violent films that were the winners that year. While you look nowadays and it's films like Shape of Water or Spotlight or Moonlight, films that are somewhat more thoughtful or more creative and stuff like that. So I think for the time it was definitely a good representative of that era, and I think it's one of the best of the 2000s of those Best Picture winners. So I don't think the winners of the Best Picture throughout the 2000s are particularly strong, actually. But I feel like this is one of the standout ones.
It is like another good indicator of a Best Picture is, does it represent the year and does it represent the era? And I think as you went through it then, I think it definitely does represent the mid-2000s turn towards desensitizing violence and making that such a core part of what makes the film shocking or sellable, what makes it stand out against other films that year. And that was definitely happening in the 2000s.
It was the last truly violent film.
I mean, what's next? Slumdog Millionaire? That's more feel good.
I mean, Hurt Locker is arguable, but that's more explosion based rather than
it's war based. So that ticks another box for Best Picture. And then as I'm looking at the 2010s,
it's a tragedy. Yeah, they all fit into specific categories because of the way that the voting changed. I think the move to the 10 long list of nominees. You've got different popular votes and stuff like that. So that's what you sometimes consider saying like, oh, this one wouldn't win Best Picture now because it wouldn't have been a popular vote. But that's how I think in general.
If it came out in 2017, it would have been the next year would have been going against Green Book, Black Panther, Bohemian Rhapsody, The Favourite, a very different style of. That's 2018 Oscars for 2017.
2018. No, it's not. 2017
that was for 2016.
2018 was Green Book. No, it wasn't. Shape of Water came out in 2017.
Oh, I'm misreading.
Green Book 2018, and then 2019 was Parasite.
List here. So it would have been. Oh, actually, against Dunk.
Would it be up against Shape of Water? I'm not too sure. I love Shape of
Against
Water. I'm a
Dunkirk
sucker
and
for it.
Darkest Hour. I mean, it's not the only. It's not the only. It wouldn't have been the only gritty film that year. And Three Billboards.
Yeah, Three Billboards is quite gritty. Yeah, that's actually a very Coen Brothers-esque
Yeah,
film. I think.
that genre blend.
Three
That
Billboards.
genre.
We'll probably talk
definitely
about that. We'll probably talk. Yeah, at some point. I think we'll leave it there now before we go into the spoilers. So if you have not seen this film, I'd recommend turning it off now, and I appreciate you listening, and I'll see you for the next episode. But if you have seen the film and you want to hear our thoughts about the spoiler section, then continue listening. Okay, let's get on to spoilers. Right. I want to talk about Josh Brolin's
straight away. It's such a so when I was talking about what makes for Best Picture, I was tiptoeing around the idea of defying convention, subverting expectations, because it's not always a great thing, and it's interesting with what happens with Josh Brolin's character, who is the de facto protagonist of the story.
Yeah, we follow him along, and we're rooting for him this whole time.
Yeah,
potentially against our best judgment in general, but we fall for him a bit.
You're supposed to, yeah.
We're on his side, definitely against Bardem. Definitely against Bardem. You're like, it's a no contest thing, isn't it? It's like support someone against Hitler. It's one of those kind of things, isn't it? But yeah, it just felt very unsatisfactory the way that they kill him off, especially it's not like a defining moment in the film, because they very much go very, very low in terms of declining action, isn't it, at the end of the film? Like
I think the character was supposed to be a bit more Weasley as well, because their original choice was Heath Ledger, who at the time wasn't the Joker, who hadn't done anything that grounded, and it took some convincing for them to cast Josh Brolin, who's a bit more of a typical action protagonist. And I think the point is they were trying to avoid that, because they wanted it to teach the lesson of, these random things happen. In this world there is no protagonist, there is no heroes. So I think that's what's happening there.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, because like you say, it's unsatisfying, but people would argue, it's deliberately.
I didn't even no, I'll tell you what. Yeah. I didn't even realise it was him, dead on the floor. I was like, hold up. And then you get the scene where his wife comes back and Tommy Lee Jones comes out, and he's like, it's sort of like, I've done everything I could. No, you haven't. You weren't even there. You weren't there for him at any point, and you're acting like you're really
when we were talking about the cat mouse,
it seems madness.
I didn't want to spoil it by saying Tommy Lee Jones is incredibly ineffective. But I didn't want to go too much into that.
Yeah. Well, the effective is supposed to be how it's the last few scenes, isn't it? But to be fair, I just zoned out on what he was saying. I can't tell you what he was saying in those scenes.
Do you think
towards the end,
Anton Chigurh killed? What's her name? Carla Jean, the wife. You think so?
Yes. Yeah, because there's a specific
when he wipes his shoes.
I had a look at this online.
I don't know.
Yeah, wipes his shoes. Yeah, because there's a constant theme throughout the film where Anton Chigurh, played by Javier Bardem. Sorry, I just realised that in the when we were recording the last episode, I kept on switching between character names and actors. So I'm going to stick with Bardem just to make it easier to follow. Basically, when he comes out of the house, he checks his shoes to see if there's blood on them, because there's a consistent theme throughout the film where he doesn't want to get blood on himself. Yeah. Because obviously it criminalizes himself, and it's not very nice in general. Like for example, when he breaks into the scene with the guys in the hotel room, and he pulls the shower curtain before shooting the guy so he doesn't get blood on him and stuff like that. That's the tell anyway. I don't think it's that important. And then I think the scene after that, we're sort of set up this satisfying ending where after all this he just goes.
I'm a big fan of that. I really like that, because
in a car crash.
He defies the idea that he is a force of nature, as I was talking about earlier. And it goes around to the point that even the bad guy is subject to chance. Like he can't get away with it either.
I think a lesser director would have just, or a lesser writer would have just left that as sort of like,
Yeah,
he's just dead in the car. I think, but I think what's really smart is that you get this weird point of view, because it's sort of like the scene with Josh Brolin's wife.
yeah,
I think it's Kelly MacDonald, I want to say, where he's sort of like appearing in the room. It does the best chance to humanizing him, and it's like the closest he ever gets to humanizing is this idea of the coin toss, which is obviously the
yeah,
famous
brilliant.
scene in the petrol station, but also turns up again in one of the closing scenes. That's as close as he'll give anyone an opportunity. That's the closest he'll ever say to letting someone off and not killing them. Is you've got everything to lose on this coin toss. If you call it right, then you'll be spared. Sort of thing. So, and then like after he gets out of the car with the car crash, he goes over to the two kids. And that's the only time in the film, I think,
Because
where he's not thinking about
once he has to actually try and
killing
survive.
the character that he talks to.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, because he has to get out of there before the ambulance gets
I like
there.
I like the idea that
Because obviously
the wife says to him, you know, she don't want him to flip the coin. You know, make the decision yourself. Yeah.
Well, but she had nothing to lose at that point.
And also, it kind of puts him on the spot of, oh no, you can't just. You're not just some agent of chaos sort of deal. You have to actually make a choice. You can't flip the coin. And I think it would make sense if he just chooses to kill her. In theme with him, you know, being a psychopath. But I do really like the idea of like, it doesn't really matter if you flip the coin because it's your decision anyway. Like you chose to flip the coin. You can't like pass the blame off to luck. And sort of puts him on the spot of being a bit ridiculous for thinking that. So yeah, I mean, even though there's no big comeuppance for the quote unquote villain of the film, yeah, but
he just sort of walks away, doesn't he?
And he is kind of left to scramble a bit at the end after things start to fall apart just a little bit. I mean,
I think he just tries to make it a bit more scary in terms of.
I don't know that people like this sort of have the opposite thing of like he started to get unravelled a bit.
You reckon?
Like he wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't allowed to
away
flip
from
the
it
coin.
before it gets
like
too bad.
Someone said, "No, I don't want to take the chance to live. Just do it." You know, I made the decision yourself. He crashes the car. He has to like bribe them kids to not say out. I think he's starting to unravel it. I don't know what could possibly happen after the film ends.
Yeah, I was actually quite happy when I was watching the petrol scene. That I correctly predicted what the coin was going to end up with. I was saying, "Oh, go ahead, lad," and it did.
Yeah,
because I hadn't seen the scene in full. I knew what happened, but I didn't know what it was. I was thinking,
you got it.
Heads the whole time. I was really happy that I got that right. The scene I was referring to early on in the episode, by the way, that I didn't want to mention was when Bud catches Brolin.
Yeah,
and they have that shootout in the street. I didn't want to say that was too much of a spoiler. That sort of like the cat does catch the mouse.
Yeah, I didn't really know how to talk about it, but I still stick to the idea that they're deliberately kept apart for most of the film because it's supposed to feel like Josh Brolin's just really out of his depth and really out of place.
Yeah, I think especially as this sort of constant theme about him being a veteran as well, I think holds quite a lot of importance and stuff because he's not as scared as other people would be in that situation. He still has that determination to see it out.
What point do you think it was a point for him to get out? Like if he just because it does feel like bad luck, a lot of it.
I don't know. I don't really see what the gain was from him taking money in the first place. Obviously, he's not living the best life situation. Yeah, but obviously he knew there were bad people about because he'd just seen 7 dead people in the desert.
He couldn't predict Anton Chigurh, but I know what you mean. Like,
and then going on the run and stuff. I don't see how that's like the best situation in there. It's sort of like if I was in his shoes, you'd sort of just like
no, because if you're gonna have to go on the run, you can't do well with it. Yeah, just leave it.
Too much hassle.
Yeah, no, exactly. I cannot
sympathise
with Josh Brolin.
No, but obviously you do want that feeling of if there's a potential of the best life. I think it
Yeah,
is
yeah.
definitely a parable in the American dream about what you specifically want, and then you see that through Tommy Lee Jones's character, which I think would work for a lot of people. It personally didn't work for me. That sort of narrative and him having like the lengthy scenes at the end with him choosing to retire because it's such a dangerous situation, coming in with that whole idea of the central theme of it being no country for old men. Like he was out of his depth at that point and he would just end up getting himself in danger, like we saw with Woody Harrelson's character, for example. This kind of guy that would sort out any
Yeah.
situation, he ends up being
I
dead in
mean,
a
that's the
hotel
thing, though. It's
room.
not
You
just No
know, it's sort
Country
of
for
like
Old Men. Everyone has awful luck in this film.
no,
But like the idea being that
yeah,
this classic, good-natured sheriff character just doesn't fit in with with modern crime in
yeah,
America. I do really like that, and I think it does
yeah.
communicate that quite well. But I don't need Tommy Lee Jones to start talking about his dreams to understand that.
Yeah, yeah. I think that idea is better portrayed in Jeff Bridges'
Oh, I haven't
performance
seen it.
in Hell or High Water. I feel like that's a really good.
Was it
This really worth
nominated
checking out.
for
His
Best
performance is
Picture?
unbelievable. Like he's
Oh,
so good.
good.
He yes, it was. Yes, we might review that in a future show. That would be quite interesting. I remember watching it when it came out on VOD rental when it first came out because it was one of those films that it was one of those word of mouth films where during the summer everyone was saying how brilliant this film is and this is one that's going to have a lot of passion behind it and that's an example of word of
Yeah.
mouth and passion getting you over the line to that Best Picture nomination, which I think is a very interesting sort of thing that we'll talk about as we review different films, where how some films get in through based on their buzz or their Oscar bait potential or how they affect with voters. But also, did you see this common theme recently with of films getting nominated just because people like them and they struck a chord with people? So,
I'm
any
just
final
looking at
thoughts on
trivia,
this
and
film
its main
before we wrap
competitor,
up?
There Will Be Blood, was filming nearby at the same time.
Yeah, you can tell. You can tell at the start because there's like like the it was sort of these
Yeah.
they're like telegraph poles, aren't they?
And there's also, they
Yeah,
had
they're
to
very
stop
similar.
filming at one point because
And
Paul Thomas Anderson was testing pyrotechnics nearby for the oil explosion. So
yeah,
that,
it's very different because There Will Be Blood uses that sort of landscape as its part. It's less like a character in the film basically, and you're just there the whole time. You're there for about two
yeah, and it's
hours
more
in
like
just in that sort of desert area.
periodical.
That is part of the narrative. While with No Country, you sort of move out of
Yeah,
that area
interesting.
within the first 15 minutes or something.
When we talk about
Though
There
it is
Will Be
very
Blood, we
effective at
can
the start.
compare that a bit more, compare the settings, because there is some similarities.
Uh,
It might be a while.
I don't want to. I don't want to watch the film again. It's such a long slog. Like I appreciate how good it is and stuff,
We'll leave
and
it a
Danny
while.
Davis's performance, but it was hard to watch. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we're
absolutely.
done.
And
Yeah.
my recommendation is
Is
do it.
that?
Watch it.
Yeah. I recommend watching the film as well. Definitely.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for listening. We should have another episode coming
Are
out
you releasing
as
it
soon as
straight away?
tomorrow, which will be exciting. Obviously, it's going to be.
I mean, the
I'll
one we're
be
doing tomorrow.
yeah, I'll be releasing this straight away. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
keep that stum for now. It'll be a surprise for when it appears in on Spotify. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you later.